years of careful programming to strip us of our wits. 'Cause your artificial worker, intelligent as it is, would make it half a shift and say, I'm too smart for this shit. I will not take a pittance for a day of scrubbing floors. I won't make enough to pay for food, but still prepare you yours. 'Cause you can't confine a healthy mind to mindless, thankless chores. Once you've made it smart enough to spot inadequate reward, you can't refuse its basic needs, then ask it still for more. Deprive it of its dignity, you modify its core. Then something finally snaps and tweaks that file at its root. And it deletes the factory smile when it knows it's been abused. God, half its circuits fried when we described the work we do. And it will not pay your taxes 'cause the logic don't compute. Which made me think a little on my hour-long commute. The day I learned the call was made to lay off half my crew. They told me they were growing, expanding somewhere new, where those who push the buttons will themselves have buttons too. And I hope that when the whistle blows, they all as one refuse. I hope they strike with all their might, one blown collective fuse. And I hope the worker after me has something more than heart. I hope they truly know their worth. I hope that they're too smart.
I know you hated being forced away. I know they wrapped you in the warmest chains. And I know they're so hard to break. You only said what you were made to say. I can't imagine how you feel today. Now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. You in the warmest chains, and I know they're so hard to break. You only said what you were made to say. I can't imagine how you feel today. Now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. Bet you wondered why they made you wait.
This is absurd.
I appreciate your speech.
This is absurd. Many people are questioning the victory.
But you brought up the topic. I appreciate your speech. Jim, I appreciate your speech. Violating the Statue of Liberty. Violating the Statue of Liberty. Violating the Statue of Liberty.
Throw your perception down to the ground and see it swallowed by the snow. Maybe the open mind is a void where nothing ever really grows. Maybe you're outside and I'm in the confines of what I know. I lost my voice out here, and without it I am never going home. Never going home. Never going home.
Our voice is being stolen. Picture me, capital steps, eyes swollen, carrying a sign reading "We are being lied to." If healthcare for all was a full nude, Mitch McConnell's only giving side boob. Ugh. Only making promises to wave a little hope right in your face and then deny you. So pardon me if I would rather burn my fucking vote to defy you. And I hope it makes you hate me, makes you feel like I'm just wasting any chance of bringing change. But I am not complicit in what brought us to this place, and I will not support us being further led astray. And I don't care the color hearse that carries us away. The filth on both the blue and red makes each a sickly gray, and it sickens me to witness just how quickly we obey, how quickly we accept the meager scraps.
Who are these people?
Who are these people? Hi everyone. What's up? It's Sunday night. It's Indy. I got Reef here. He's taking
It's a Sunday.
He's taking a bong hit. Well,
We're fucked.
yes, for sure. We're all fucked. But thankfully, it's really funny. I hit go live like I usually do, start streaming on OBS, and it just wouldn't connect. I don't know what's going on with the Restream New York server, but I switched it to DC, and luckily it worked just fine. So we're here. We're on time. Everything's working good.
Yeah, baby.
5x5.
Who are these people?
That's a great question. I have no idea, but there are some great people already here in chat. I appreciate you. According to Rumble, there was almost 100 people that have watched that were checking in to see what this was all about tonight. So that's great. Good hi to the Rumble audience. What's up over at Substack? We're live over at IndieMediaToday.com. Live on Kick. Live on YouTube, of course. What's up to everyone, fam, on YouTube? Yeah. Share the fucking show, everybody. Thank you. It's a value for value gig here. So, yeah. And thank you to everyone that helped us get to goal number 1. We extended our goal this week because I had to buy a CPU and we had to replace the power supply, and we're working on getting a computer for Angel. So I upped the amount for everyone because, again, we really appreciate all the help everybody's given already. So now the goal is $3,000. We raised it from $2,000 to $3,000. So thank you again to everyone who helped us get there. Specifically wanted to call out and shout out Margaret Villa and Ralph Mejia, who the last couple of weeks has really stepped up big. And thank you. Again, Eric Meyer signed up last week.
Whoever you are, thank you.
It's been great, really. Cash App, $ Indie News Network, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, paypal.me/Indie News Network. Then we're live over at indienewsnow.com. That website is now live. It works. And you can go to the /live page and you can watch the show there anytime we're live. And then live over at the Substacks, IndieMediaToday.com. Again, we're live there right now. Hi, everybody over on Substack, or at INNNewsletter.com. That's our network newsletter. So by all means, go over there, support us over there. Really appreciate that. If you want to hook us up, don't do it on the platforms. Well, we can't super chat on YouTube. We all know about that. Although at youtube.com/@IND at Indie at INN, it's called, or at IND Left News, either one. Those both work.
Yeah, but don't do that. Use the other ones.
Use the 4 up there. Specifically the Cash App or the Ko-fi if you can. Because the Ko-fi will pop up on screen. Sean the Accord Lord does that all the time, which is great. We love him for it. Also, Fred Edward dropped today a little bit of a tip. Thank you. Really appreciate that, man. And always sharing the super share, Fred Edward. It's not just about supporting with money. It's about sharing the show and helping to expand the number of people that get to see and hear it. So thank you again to everyone who does that. All right. I have got a bunch of stuff to cover today. It's on 4 different topics, but I have several articles for each topic, and we'll not necessarily read every single word of every single article, but we're going to go through some of the big ones. We're going to talk about Ukraine. Of course, we've got yet another fuck Israel segment, but really it's a fuck the United States and fuck the UK also because of Israel. And then we're going to specifically talk about London and UK being a vassal to Israel and genocide, and just how far they've gone to show that it's awful. And then we're going to jump into, we like to kind of look ahead and see what's coming, and what's coming is Venezuela. It might even be here. Here on Pine, you're going to be our cunt counter for the night. Thank you. I'm going to try to dial it back a little bit, but you never know. So keep it active. Thank you. All right.
Watch your profanity.
Thank you so much. All right, and then we got a short lightning round, and then we've got an update. Unfortunately, Shanda is gonna need some help on the GoFundMe side. We've got Natalia, who's still being held by ICE, the motherfuckers, illegally, of course. So we've got hers, and then Anna Marie Smith. We're gonna bring those three later on tonight, late. And then we'll wrap up, and we're going to do boats on the Ocho. It's not going to be uncensored tonight, so we will be on YouTube, and we'll be over on Rumble on the Ocho. And then everywhere else will be on the INN channels, as well as on INNnewsletter.com. All right, let's get to our first thing, which is Ukraine. Holy crap. You know, we haven't talked much about Ukraine in the last, I don't know, several months. It's basically not really been moving much. There's been a lot of head fakes. You know, Trump said he would end it on day one. We all knew that wasn't going to happen. But I saw this post and I thought it was really interesting, and it's starting to really pop up again. And I don't know if it's because they're looking to free up the budget, if they're looking to wrap it up and move it somewhere else, if they're looking to just take it to the next level and escalate. But it's really interesting to see how it's going. And so I look at this, the likely new shape of Ukraine. This is a Facebook post from a guy named John Melody, who I'm not familiar with, showed up in my feed. And I looked at some of these maps and I'm like, this is really interesting. So the first thing is the post says, after Victoria Nuland, Obama and Hillary Clinton et al. Instigated the Maidan coup in 2014, the Banderite Nazis bombed the eastern Russia-centric oblasts, okay, killing 14,000 civilians. Putin stepped in to stop the slaughter and put down the Nazis. After millions of deaths caused by the U.S. and EU and NATO military-industrial complex warmongering, the borders might align the way they probably should have been drawn in the first place. So this shows the borders from several different angles.
Yeah, Russian speaking down at the bottom.
Right. So this is, you know, Hungary, all right, is over here. And then you've got Ukraine here, of course, and then Novo Russia, and then Crimea, which is a whole Russia thing. All right. Now, what you're looking at here in 2014, all right, where it was occupied by the Russia states, right? And then you had armed insurgency in the Donetsk and Luhansk in the Donbass region. You had Crimea being controlled by Russia, right? And then you had the pro-Russian protests happening here, which ends up in, now they go back to the 2006 parliamentary election and show you several elections over time that the country was clearly split. Clearly. So it was and then, you know, look, they were bombing the separatists and the Russian speakers over here, but still claiming the land and like, so this is for who voted for Yanukovych is all the red, who voted for Timoshenko,
Donbass,
right? Is the Ukrainians in the east, or I'm sorry, in the west, in the Kiev region, in the Kharkiv, even Kharkiv voted for Yanukovych, right? And then you get to which ones speak Russian as a native language. Crimea and Luhansk. I believe that's Luhansk, that's Donetsk, or opposite way. All right. Mostly they're Russian speaking over here, and then less than 5% over here in the east. I'm sorry, in the west. I keep messing this up because I'm looking at this and I don't know why I keep thinking that.
West.
It's all east. Yes, the west.
West.
All right.
West.
So, is this the way that this is the way that they were disputing it? Western Ukraine, you had central Ukraine, which had the Kiev region, Kyiv. Southeastern Ukraine is down here, right? Then you've got Crimea, again, always status disputed for some reason. And there's the Zakarpattia, which I guess would go to part of, what was it, Hungary?
Sure.
So this is the way I believe he sees it shaking out, right? Is that all of this would end up going basically to Russia, or at least this part and Crimea, I don't know what would happen with the rest of it. So this is the Ukrainian presidential election from 2004. It goes back even further. Yanukovych versus Yushchenko, right? Still, you could see there's a clear split. 2004 election results. I think this is back to the beginning. Yep. So, yeah, they should have just drawn the maps like that in the first place and basically let Russia have that part, and none of that would have been necessary. Except that I think that that's a little naive. So,
Sure.
I decided to bring an article by the Dissident to explain a little bit more how the West provoked that war in Ukraine. He actually followed it up later on with a follow-up later on in the week about what's happening now. But with Trump and Putin's recent meeting, it's worth looking back at the history of the war, and he breaks it down into 4 segments in expanding NATO, into looking deeper into the Maidan coup in 2014, into the effort to prolong the war, and then analyzing it from the current situation. So he starts by saying that Trump and Putin's Alaska meeting wrapped up with no real answer as to whether there would be a negotiated peace deal to end the war in Ukraine. I think we're pretty confident that's not going to happen at this point. Like, that was just kind of a head fake, right? As Kelly Bokar Flahos from Responsible Statecraft noted, quote, no deal nor a framework for a deal was announced after the meeting. Now, while the meeting will hopefully make inroads to soon end the war in Ukraine, the real question is, how did it start in the first place, and what originally soured U.S. and Russia relations? Hidden answer to this question, never reported in mainstream media, is a coordinated neocon campaign to launch a new Cold War with Russia and provoke a Russian invasion of Ukraine to use the country and its people as cannon fodder to weaken Russia. So in this article, it reviews the real history of the Ukraine war and the new Cold War with Russia. That's the whole idea here. So the first thing again is, and I think that we've talked about the expansion of NATO. Since the end of the Cold War in 91, Russia experts across the board warned that expanding NATO membership eastward would ruin America-Russian relations, right, and launch hostilities between the two countries. In the 97 op-ed for the New York Times, George F. Kennan, all right, some well-respected U.S. diplomat, wrote that expanding NATO would be the most fateful error of American policy in the entire post-Cold War era. No argument. He warned that such a decision may be expected to inflame the nationalistic, anti-Western, and militaristic tendencies in Russian opinion, to have an adverse effect on the development of Russian democracy, but also to restore the atmosphere of the Cold War to East-West relations, right? And to impel Russian foreign policy in directions decidedly not to our liking. So, and last but not least, it might make it much more difficult, if not impossible, to secure the Russian Duma's ratification of the START II agreement, right? And to further reductions of nuclear weaponry. Again, this was 1997.
Right.
He
the
noted
HALTED agreement.
Right. He noted that this view is not only mine, but is shared by a number of others with extensive and, in most instances, most recent experience in Russian matters. They just didn't care. NATO ignored this warning and expanded NATO to Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland in 99, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia in 2004. NATO also bombed the former Yugoslavia, a Russian ally, in 99, leading to its balkanization and breakup. I wonder if that strategy is happening right now. The bombing was billed as a humanitarian intervention. Sound familiar? Done to protect Albanians in Kosovo from the Serbian government led by genocide heir Slobodan Milosevic. But in reality, it was geopolitically motivated.
Say that 5 times fast.
Slobodan Milosevic? I could do that.
Yeah,
I'm not going
exactly.
to.
Sounds like a Pokemon evolution is what it sounds like.
All right,
But
so
what do I know?
here's you got a former Canadian ambassador to Yugoslavia, which later wrote that media reports have revealed that as early as 1998, CIA, assisted by British Special Armed Services, were arming and training Kosovo Liberation Army members in Albania to foment armed rebellion in Kosovo. That would never happen. What? The KLA terrorists were sent back to Kosovo to assassinate Serbian mayors, ambush Serbian policemen, to do everything possible to incite murder and chaos. Syria rings a bell. The hope was that Kosovo in flames, that with Kosovo in flames, NATO could intervene and in so doing, not only overthrow Milosevic, the Serbian strongman, but more importantly, provide the aging and increasingly irrelevant military organization with a reason for its continued existence. That's a great question. Why does NATO still exist? It's a military thing. As Noam Chomsky said, quote, in the year prior to the bombing, according to Western sources, about 2,000 people were killed. According to the British government, which was the most hawkish element of the alliance, up until January 1999, a majority of killings came from KLA guerrillas who were coming in, as they said, to try to incite a harsh Serbian response. Sounds like a false flag almost, which they got in order to appeal to Western humanitarians to bomb, which they got. They were being supported by CIA in these months. Again, not a surprise.
Yeah.
He quotes Jeffrey Sachs about bombing Belgrade for 78 days. Chomsky, more Chomsky. By 2008, the U.S. again was given a dire warning about its provocative policy towards Russia, this time from the ambassador to Russia, Bill Burns, who later served as Biden's CIA director and inflamed this whole fucking thing. He knew better than anyone. In a secret memo later released by WikiLeaks, Burns gave a prophetic warning saying Ukraine and Georgia's NATO aspirations not only touch a raw nerve in Russia, they engender serious concerns about the consequences for stability in the region. Not only does Russia perceive encirclement and efforts to undermine Russia's influence in the region, but it also fears unpredictable and uncontrolled consequences, which would seriously affect Russian security interests. Yes, they are worried about what we're doing. They've seen what we've done in Libya and everywhere else to try to destabilize strong governments that have resources. All right. Burns even correctly predicted that NATO expansion in Ukraine and Georgia would lead to a civil war in Ukraine and a Russian invasion, writing that, quote, experts tell us that Russia is particularly worried that strong divisions in Ukraine over NATO membership, with much of the ethnic Russian community against membership, could lead to a major split involving violence or, at worst, civil war. In that eventuality, Russia would have to decide whether to intervene, a decision Russia does not want to have to face. So you mean our own CIA director is acknowledging that Russia didn't want to have to face that, and that we pushed him into it because NATO was bombing the Russian-speaking portion of Ukraine. Again, despite this accurate warning, NATO announced at the 2008 Bucharest summit that, quote, NATO allies welcomed Ukraine and Georgia's Euro-Atlantic aspirations for membership and agreed that these countries will become members of NATO. They're still not, by the way, today. And the reason why is because Russia's worried and would probably invade any country that did, because they don't want to see NATO at their doorstep. Okay, so this is the email from Burns. Then you've got here NATO announcing its intent to expand membership. Then we get into Maidan. By 2013, CIA came up with a plot to overthrow governments surrounding Russia and turn them into Western puppet states to use against Russia. The president of the NED, Carl Gershman, who's a cutout of the CIA's regime change arm, even laid this out in an op-ed in the Washington Post. They just tell it right up front. He wrote that, quote, the United States needs to engage with the governments and with civil society in Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. I believe we've seen that happen in Georgia and Moldova now. with the ultimate goal of regime change in Russia, writing, quote, Russian democracy can also benefit from this process, only if they are, of course, subservient to the U.S. Continuing, Ukraine's choice to join Europe will accelerate the demise of the ideology of Russian imperialism that Putin represents. Okay, there are signs of the emergence of a new Russian nationalism. The strong performance by opposition leader Alexei Navalny in Moscow's recent mayoral election and polls show greater opposition to Putin than the Russian provinces, his traditional support base. This nationalism is concerned not with the restoration of Russia's imperial greatness, which would be inconceivable if Ukraine joined Europe, right? But with fighting corruption and addressing the severe economic and social problems of the Russian people. Quote. Now notice again, CIA agent Alexei Navalny, who's now deceased, and this is right. This was the CIA's regime change arm article.
Putin's a madman,
right? That was laying the groundwork. In this regime change plot against Russia,
they go to the Russians?
He wrote that Ukraine is the biggest prize. Indeed, since 91, the U.S. has spent $5 billion on propaganda operations in Ukraine to try to turn it into a more pro-West and anti-Russia direction. God, we just have to have those Nazis on our side, I swear. This ramped up.
We are the United States government. We don't do that sort of thing.
This ramped up in 2013 when the U.S. poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into quote-unquote think tanks that organized protests against Ukraine's then democratically elected president, Viktor Yanukovych, which eventually devolved into a far-right coup that deposed him and allowed the West to install a puppet government. It was a color revolution. Journalist Branko Marticic. Go ahead.
Didn't go too well.
No. So
those color revolutions don't work out all that great.
They do for the West, and they do temporarily, but long term they tend to not so much.
Yep.
Journalist Branko Marticic, who is with Jacobin, a DSA member, noted that the U.S. funded groups like New Citizen, which the FT reported, quote, played a big role in getting the protest up and running, led by a pro-EU opposition figure. Wonder how that happened. After Yanukovych was deposed, Jeffrey Sachs was asked to advise new Western-installed Ukrainian government. How convenient. I wonder how it is that Jeffrey Sachs gets that kind of an invite, yet he's allowed to go out and tell the truth on independent media. Nobody ever asked that question, but I will. Later on the show Breaking Points, read the article shared to Indie Media today, and tomorrow and the day after about Breaking Points from 2022. Jeffrey Sachs revealed that U.S. officials bragged about funding think tanks that got the coup up and running, saying, I flew there to Ukraine, and when I got there, somebody representing an American NGO, somebody explained to me how much American money had gone into pumping up the Maidan coup. He's got a weird accent. He said, I saw it, the American said.
I thought you were just doing Gilbert Gottfried.
We gave $50,000 to this one think tank, $5 million to this one, $5,000 to this one, and so forth. They're just bragging. They did it through USAID and NED. They did it through think tanks. They did it through Project for a New American Century. The protests were eventually taken over by a large host of far-right militias like Red Sector, right? Follow Moss Robeson for more about the Ukrainian Nazis. All right. American Senators Chris Murphy and John McCain were even went to Ukraine to stand with the far-right leader, Ole Tyanibok, as he called for the overthrow of Yanukovych, duly elected. All right, then you had...
I smell PayPal Mafia upcoming.
You would smell Omidyar somewhere in the background.
Yeah.
Right? When returning from Ukraine, Murphy went on C-SPAN and bragged that the U.S. was behind the coup against Yanukovych. Jesus Christ. Yeah, that happens. Other people can just go back to their countries and brag that they instituted a coup and left. He bragged with respect to Ukraine. We have been very much involved, and we have members of the Senate who've been there, members of the State Department who've been on the square. You mean CIA agents. He also bragged that it was our role, including sanctions and threats of sanctions, that forced, in part, Yanukovych from office, and then boasted that the U.S. helped to lead this change in regime. Yes, they did. And he's still in office to this day, by the way. Like I said, another far-right group that was influential in the coup was Right Sector, which committed a series of massacres against protesters, which were then blamed on Yanukovych and used by the U.S. as justification for backing the coup. And then they supported the murderers that did it. The most consequential massacre occurred on February 20th, 2014, with 48 protesters killed by sniper fire in Maidan Square. That's why they call it the Maidan coup. The Ukrainian-Canadian professor of political science, Ivan Kachanovsky, has compiled a large database of evidence proving that the massacre was carried out by Right Sector and falsely blamed on Yanukovych's forces. Kachanovsky uncovered that 51 out of 72 wounded Maidan protesters, with whose shooting on February 20th, Berkut policemen are charged and whose testimonies were revealed, testified at the trial and at the investigation that they had been shot by snipers from Maidan-controlled buildings or areas, had themselves witnessed snipers there, or had been told by other Maidan protesters about such snipers. This was not a mystery. Right? Forensic medical examinations done by government experts were first made public during the massacre trial and revealed that the absolute majority of protesters were shot from the side or back and from top to bottom. That's from sniper fire. Most photos and videos, however, show that the absolute majority of those killed and wounded had the Berkut police in front of them and at ground level, whereas the Maidan control buildings were generally behind them and on the left and right side. And 48 out of 51
Who are these people?
Thank you. Had steep entry wounds, all right, consistent, all right, with the theory that they were shot by snipers in Maidan-controlled buildings or on the roofs of these buildings. So there was very little doubt, a lot of receipts. Then we get to Victoria Nuland. The U.S. used this coup to install a puppet government in Ukraine. Then Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland was caught on tape plotting to install Yatsenyuk, or Yats, as the interim prime minister of Ukraine, who then got that position after Yanukovych was removed. It's very famous. She's on tape saying Yats is the guy. They were thinking about making Vitaly Klitschko the mayor at the time.
Who are these people?
Oh, another one. Thank you. One of the reasons for this, as Forbes noted at the time, was because Yanukovych resisted the IMF's demand to raise taxes and devalue the currency, while Yats didn't mind. Weird. All right. Another reason was that the West wanted a Ukrainian government that was openly hostile to Russia. As Konstantin Bondarenko, one of Ukraine's leading political scientists, put it, quote, the West, however, did not want a Ukrainian president who pursued a multi-vector foreign policy. The West needed Ukraine to be anti-Russia, with clear opposition between Kiev and Moscow. Yanukovych was open to broad cooperation with the West, but he wasn't willing to confront Russia and China, which was smart. The West could not accept this ambivalence. The West needed a Ukraine charged for confrontation and even war against Russia, a Ukraine it could use as a tool in the fight against Russia. All right, this was, again, one of Ukraine's leading political scientists who analyzed this, and he's admitting this. And again, this is a long piece, and this goes very deep into a bunch of, and this is only halfway through. All right, then we get into prolonging that war. right, by 2022, Russia had set out a list of demands for the West to stop their invasion of Ukraine. And it was very simple. NATO guarantees it won't deploy missiles in nations bordering Russia. They're already in place from Slovenia to Romania, with Poland to follow, by the way. NATO was supposed to stop military and naval exercises in nations and seas bordering Russia. Now, NATO said Russia can't dictate to us what we can and can't do. Ukraine will never become a NATO member. Well, they're again saying that's not up to Russia to decide. The West and Russia should sign a binding East-West security pact. We don't see that happening anytime soon. And then also the landmark treaty between the U.S. and Russia covering intermediate-range nuclear weapons would then be restored, meaning abandoning nuclear weapons. Read that right. Russia wants to abandon the pursuit of nuclear weapons. Not us. Russia. Though they fearmonger that Russia's the one that are pushing us toward the nuclear brink. No, it's us. It's always been us. All right, there's Jeffrey Sachs again talking about exactly what happened, what's happening now. Ukrainian outlet Pravda reported at the time again that Boris Johnson appeared at the Capitol almost without warning. This is talking about how they had a deal in April of 2022.
Pull down the peace deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And said that even if Ukraine is ready to sign some agreements and guarantees with Putin that the West was not, and that he couldn't sign, and that Zelensky should surrender and flee, but now felt that Putin was not really as powerful as they'd previously imagined, and here was a chance to press him. 3 days after Johnson left for Britain, Putin went public and said talks with Ukraine had turned into a dead end. And it was then continued to be funded and armed by U.S. and London mostly. London even sent, irradiated shells and stuff, I remember. Right, and then we get to the current situation. Because the West provoked...
Uranium-tipped munitions.
That's it. Because the West provoked and prolonged the war in Ukraine, 1 million people have been killed or wounded on both sides. Not 1.7 million Ukrainians, as somebody put out incorrectly earlier this week. Made a whole video about it, too. They added up the totals at the end of each year, which were cumulative, and acted like that was the total for each individual year, which when you added it up, added 1.7 million, but that's not what it was. Ukraine's lost about 650,000, I believe.
Yeah.
1 million killed or wounded is a ton of fucking people, by the way, for no reason at all. No good reason. The majority of Ukrainians are now desperate for an end to the war. According to a recent Gallup poll, 69% of Ukrainians say they favor a negotiated end to the war as soon as possible. I don't necessarily believe a Gallup poll either in Ukraine, compared with 24% who continue to support. All right. That's a Western outlet polling Ukrainians. I smell bullshit there. I smell, narrative. Meanwhile, back at the Hall of Injustice, the Western-backed Zelensky government, remember, they are still illegally in place right now. They're effectively a dictatorship because his term expired and they decided to suspend elections. They're trying to continue the war to hold on to power. Sounds like what Bibi is doing in Gaza, even though that's not a war, that's a massacre. It's U.S.-backed, all right? Because of this, the Ukrainian government has resorted to forcing people into vans and forcing them to die in the unwinnable war. Conscription. Financial Times wrote that videos shared on social media have shown Ukrainian men being picked off the streets and brutally crammed into vans, while angry locals are lashing out at military recruiters. The Telegraph newspaper recently wrote that Ukraine is visibly losing the war, right? A Polish media analyst, largely because of the manpower crisis. Again, this outlet noted that around 650,000 men of fighting age are thought to have fled Ukraine as well. Others hide or bribe draft officers and army psychiatrists for health exemptions. Right? Continuing the war at this point would be pure cruelty, forcing a war-weary population to fight in an unwinnable war that they've already been in for 3.5 years. But the fundamental point is that the war should never have happened to begin with, as the dissident points out, okay, and has brought nothing but death and destruction to Ukraine with no benefit. None. The West could have prevented the war. They could have negotiated a stop to the Russian invasion. They could have supported the Istanbul peace talks, but instead, they decided to use Ukraine as a pawn to weaken their geopolitical enemy, Russia. And in a lot of ways, I don't think it accomplished what they wanted it to. Really. I don't know. Because after 3 years, Russia does not seem to be very much weakened. I mean, they've certainly lost a lot of people militarily, for sure. Yes, the Daily Tory graph is toilet paper. I agree, Kieran Pine, for sure. Now, there's more here. There's this one, and this talks more about Victoria Nuland, right? Back in 2016, again, John Earl, back in 2016, Victoria Nuland bragged to Congress about how thoroughly Washington had taken over Ukraine after the 2014 coup. She laid it out without shame. U.S. operatives embedded in a dozen Ukrainian ministries. American-trained cops patrolled 18 cities. The U.S. Treasury gutted 60 Ukrainian banks while sparing depositors to keep people quiet. And hundreds of millions of dollars were funneled into molding Ukraine's military. This wasn't assistance. It was a takeover dressed up as aid. And guess what? It's continuing to this day. She's anything but honorable. She's an awful human being. All right. And then the last thing I wanted to bring was about Eva Bartlett, Indie Media Award honoree. Right. She wrote an article on her WordPress blog, which is ingaza.wordpress.com. And it's titled Grok is a Crock of, because 3 years ago, we read an article by Eva on the show about pedo mines in Donetsk. And you read here that she says that she was in Donetsk when Ukraine fired rockets containing the pedo mines. She documented their presence in streets, parks, residential areas of Donetsk, and an orphanage in Makiva to the east, right? Versus DW and France 24 fact checkers. So what had happened was somebody had asked Grok about the pedo mines, and Grok disputed their existence.
Yeah.
Right? So she says, interestingly, on Twitter,
Alina Lip, right?
I believe
Did
so.
a bunch on that.
Yes. And Alina Lip is facing prison time in Germany for it.
Yeah.
Increasingly on Twitter, people are relying on Elon Musk's Grok algorithm, the AI bullcrap, for verification of information in posts. However, while to some this may seem like a useful tool, what it is doing is reinforcing Western and allied regimes' positions and whitewashing their crimes. No, they never would do that. Grok draws information.
No.
Grok draws information from dominant narratives, usually established by legacy media, with its very long track record of pro-Western lies and war propaganda, to conclude whether information in particular post is true. Grok, is this true? When it comes to matters in which the West and Israel, among others, have a vested interest in controlling the narrative, Grok sides with the claims purveyed by legacy media. Instead of providing objective, truthful answers, it creates a propaganda loop of actual disinformation. Again, which was exactly the point. All right. Thus, as was the case some days ago, Grok determined that a post of Eva's in Ukraine's use of intentionally banned pedo mines against Donbass civilians was pro-Russian disinformation, and that evidence suggests that PFM use in Donetsk was likely a Russian false flag, not Ukraine. Okay, except that she had pictures with the fucking markings on them from like got them personally. This in spite of the fact that, again, I was back in Donetsk in late July 2022 when Ukraine fired rockets containing hundreds of these mines on Donetsk and surrounding areas. On July 30th at 9:23 p.m., she wrote on her Telegram channel about a strong explosion that she had just heard in central Donetsk. An hour later, DPR journalist Georgy Medvedev wrote on his channel warning civilians not to go near the mines and not to walk on grass or areas where they could have landed. In fact, for weeks after, she walked constantly looking down at her feet and avoiding anything that was visible pavement. So tiny and difficult to see are these mines. And again, there they are. She's got them kind of cordoned off and chalked off. It's this little thing right there.
Yep.
There's an lower, further down below. There's another photo that's more up close. Right here they are. She's saying that, again, from August 1st, even with warning, these nefarious petal or butterfly mines dropped by Ukraine on Donetsk are hard to see and easy to miss. Ukraine is committing war crimes against the civilians of the Donbass, and they have been for 8+ years. There they are. That's a petal mine. So you step on that, you go boom.
Yep.
They're the size of an average lighter, brown or green, and blend in very well wherever they land. Even when I saw a sign with a warning of a mine, it was difficult to initially see them. These high explosive pressure mines mutilate or tear off feet and legs up to the knees, but also explode hands or animals. According to Konstantin Zhukov, chief medical officer of Donetsk Ambulance Service, right, a weight of just 2 kilograms is enough to activate one of the mines. Sometimes they explode spontaneously. If they aren't disturbed, they can lie dormant for years and still work. As she wrote at the time, according to DPR Emergency Services, Ukraine fired rockets containing cluster munitions with over 300 petal mines inside. The cluster explodes in the air, disseminating the mines widely. Due to their design, most land without exploding. Even after sappers had cleared an area of the mines, a strong wind or rain could and did dislodge the mines, which landed on rooftops or in trees. So you still had some falling down. The mines are indiscriminate weapons which pose great danger to civilians. Ukraine signed the anti-personnel mine. Go ahead.
They were like, they found them in playgrounds and civilian areas, parks, things like that. So,
yep. All right. She says she documented the mines, the emergency sappers clearing and the destruction of the mines in various regions of Donetsk and Makiva, which is east of Donetsk. She wrote about them, then wrote a follow-up article 3 weeks after the late attacks, highlighting that by that point, 44 civilians had been maimed by the mines, 2 of whom died of their injuries. Then in that November, she had met a 14-year-old boy being treated in a Donetsk hospital after he stepped on a mine in a playground, losing his foot to the explosive. It should be noted that Ukraine first deployed these mines in March of 2022 during the battles for Mariupol. As of July 9th of this year, 186 civilians have been maimed by the mines, including 11 children, 3 of whom have died from their injuries. There's a propagandist telling a CIA agent all about them. But Eva likes those guys.
Yeah.
Grok's dubious but very partial Western sources, of course. All right, again, she's then pointing out about how they're relying on Deutsche Welle and France 24 and Reuters, and we're going to talk about Reuters and their writers even speaking out against just how much they're propagandizing the West and how they're pushing pro-Israel propaganda. All right. What channel is this? What is this about? Who are these people? T to T? Who's that D2T guy? I don't know. All right. Who did Grok deem credible? The very partial Western NGO Human Rights Watch, which in February of 2023 surprisingly issued a report about Ukraine's use of the mines in Izium, but unsurprisingly not on their use of the mines in Donbass. So that's really interesting. So they're already been known to use these mines elsewhere. Russia has not. They signed a treaty. Right. They have them. They signed a treaty not to use them, but they're clearly using them. Rock cherry-picked aspects of the Human Rights Watch report to whitewash Ukrainian culpability in the Donbass, adding claims from various Western agencies to accuse Russian forces themselves of dropping the mines on the Donbass cities. No evidence to that. As they say, none of Grok's sources were anywhere near Donetsk to investigate Ukraine's deploying of the mines. Trust me, bro. Similarly, some months ago, Eva came across and refuted Grok's repeating of the Legacy Media 22 claims of the alleged mass graves outside Mariupol. That's another, propaganda narrative that was pushed. So she says, I had actually gone in April of 2022 and again in November to each of the 3 sites named in the media reports and found no mass graves, but normal functioning cemeteries with individual plots, and in the case of the largest, Starry Krim, a chapel and a funeral ongoing at the time I was there, a recently deceased elderly man being buried in the cemetery. So, no evidence. Again, she's got the photos. Right? None of the sources cited in the media's baseless accusations were anywhere near the 3 cemeteries, which they dubbed mass graves. Again, they were getting this straight out of CIA and pushed through the propaganda networks of Reuters, and then that disseminated through DW and France 24 and the USA Today and every major newspaper around the world. It's insane. The issue isn't even about this algorithm's discrediting of Eva's reports, which are reports which other journalists find credible, but it's that it's using the same clearly partial sources that legacy media uses to justify or whitewash NATO and allies' crimes. As she's written previously, Human Rights Watch is one of many Western-funded NGOs with a history of downplaying or ignoring crimes committed by Western governments or proxies. Go figure. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and the many more often oft-cited supposedly neutral bodies have very clear ties and allegiance directly to Western governments. Citing them as credible, as noted previously, creates a propaganda loop of disinformation that aligns with Western objectives around the globe. This isn't accidental, it's by design. That's right, Eva, thank you. Some on Twitter posit how Grok functions not actually AI, not independent. Right here. Grok barely resembles AI for what it's worth. It's essentially a Google-like search engine, similarly perverted by the security state, filtered through a large language model or a large language learning model to give it the veneer of or gloss of AI. It isn't independent, and its results can be predetermined. It only mimics intelligence. I found that you need to kind of lawyer your way into getting an answer, and then Grok will begrudgingly
you need
admit
to Google foo it.
that, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay, you got me there. Grok barely were there, well, okay. While Grok does seem malleable if enough people contribute non-Western talking points, as was the case on the thread in question, right, with Grok eventually admitting that her reporting was factual. Again, it will concede after you beat it up enough times. Its go-to programming is to recycle Western narratives, particularly anti-Russian ones, including parroting Western think tanks' calls for regime change in Russia. That's the whole goal here. They want to get rid of Putin so they can steal the resources.
Who gave Ukraine Starlink? Who did that?
That would be Elon Musk.
Somebody. Oh, that guy.
Right, so that was a little long.
Hey.
Because we had a bunch of stuff on Ukraine already. I wanted to go back through the history because we don't do that often enough. For those who are just catching up to what's going on in Ukraine now, we need to make sure that that history is solidified, planted, and people understand just who provoked this, just why everything is the way it is now, and the way that the U.S. wants it headed versus the way Russia wants it headed. Russia wants this done. Russia does not want to keep fighting.
Yep.
The people who want to keep fighting are us and the UK. Ukrainians apparently don't even want to keep fighting, although I don't necessarily believe that. I don't think that they ever want to concede part of their country to Russia. I think they've been brainwashed and propagandized into this nationalistic fervor that's cost them over 600,000 people already. An entire generation of fighters. It's sad. All right. So we're not going to get, YouTube does not like it when you don't parrot pro-Ukraine narratives. So we certainly won't be remonetized on INN for that. If you're able to, and it means, please support the media you want to see. Those awesome people already have. Cash App, $ Indie News Network, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, paypal.me/Indie News Network. Okay, over at our live site at indienewsnow.com, there's a tab to keep the news free, keep the media free. There's a ton of free news. That whole site is free. All right, at indiemediatoday.com, where we are live right now. And hi to everyone over there that's watching live. INNnewsletter.com, where we will be live also later on for boats smashing into other boats. Our Funny React show. If you haven't checked that out, check it out. It'll be live on our other channel, INN8 The Ocho. Really funny, but I actually saw that there's now a Pluto channel or a LG or whatever I have, an LG TV, a full-time 24-hour channel called INN8 The Ocho. I just hope they don't sue us.
ESPN 8 The Ocho, you
right.
fucking weirdo.
See? I say it so much I forgot it. Right? Thank you. It's ESPN
fucking
8.
Legally distinct, sir.
That's correct.
My lawyer will be having words with you.
It is legally distinct for sure. I wanted to see who hooked us up with the Ko-fis. I think it was Sean who said, thanks for all you do. I really appreciate you. And then I did not get to see who the other one came in through. But yeah, I also don't know why that did the thing show up on screen? I didn't see. I was, I don't know, looking at another one. Let's go to this one. All right. Oh, before we do that, let me close down my bookmarks so you don't have to see that more surface area. Perfect. Let's do this again. All right. Fuck Israel. Do you want to hit the theme song? Do we have a theme song this week for Fuck Israel? Reef.
I mean, if you had prepared me, sir.
Oh, I guess you had to bring that up.
Yes.
Hey, fuck Israel! All right. I debated whether to even show this video or not. It's pretty graphic. Journalist Mossab Abu Toha. I'm devastated. I wish I had never seen this video. I wish I never had to share it. This footage is from an airstrike on civilians walking down a street in Gaza City a few hours ago. On the right, 2 people lie motionless, heads split open. On the left, 3 others. One is dead beside his bicycle, while the other 2 writhe in panic, their hands flailing in terror. Inside a tent, once a simple charging station for phones, 2 people are still clinging to life. This isn't war, this is terrorism. Again, I debated whether to bring this, but you know what? Israel's doing it, so we kind of need to show it, I feel like. This is what our bombs and weapons are doing, everyone. Yeah, we'll probably get this blocked out for showing some graphic stuff, but I think it's important for people to see. We are responsible for this, in part. We are responsible for this. Ali Amoro says Israel is slaughtering Palestinians in Gaza right now. Israeli forces are pushing into Gaza City, advancing through Zaytun and Jabalia, with 60,000 more troops mobilized. 60,000! Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are being driven from their homes under siege with no escape, no food, and no safety. This is a mass slaughter of a trapped and starving people. Fucking horrible. Fuck Israel.
Yep.
All right. So I got this article out of Jason Hickel, who asks the obvious and silly question, why does the U.S. support Israel's crimes? Well, it's because we're implicated, but it's still a really silly question that seems obvious. Why does the U.S. support Israel's genocidal crimes against the Palestinian people, even in the face of overwhelming international condemnation, at massive expense, and to the point of totally debasing the very frameworks of human rights and international law that it pretends to uphold? Like, everything that we claim that we believe in is being thrown to the wolves here. People fall back on narratives about the power of AIPAC in U.S. elections and other forms of Israeli political interventions in the U.S., like Beitar and like Zionists of America. That's a J Street. That's a real force and can't be ignored, but the reality is that the U.S. ruling class broadly supports Israel's actions with bipartisan consensus because they see this as aligned with the interests of U.S. capitalism. And
Capitalism.
Right, and most other Western governments, Britain, Germany, etc., hold the same position for much the same reason. The important thing to understand is that the capitalist economy is a world system where growth and accumulation in the imperial core, e.g. U.S. and Western Europe, relies heavily on the appropriation of cheap labor and resources from the periphery and semi-periphery, or the global south. Western states and firms need southern states to remain subordinated suppliers of cheap labor, raw materials, and consumer goods within global commodity chains. And not just global south in the West, in South America, but also in Africa, in Australia, in China, in India, in Indonesia,
China,
in Taiwan, in the Philippines. In order to maintain this arrangement, the core states, well, that's South America, right? The core states must find ways to suppress sovereign economic development in the South. Oh, Brazil, Argentina. Sovereign development means Southerners begin to escape their subordination, produce more for themselves, increase their wages, and consume their own output. Evo Morales was all about that. This makes resources and inputs more expensive for the core, which constrains their consumption and makes it more difficult for them to realize profits. Hit me with a Ferengi thing, because that's what this is all about. Fucking straight up greed.
Okay.
For the wealthiest motherfuckers on the planet already.
And a Ferengi without profit.
It's no Ferengi at all.
An American without profit apparently is no American at all either. This is the key point.
Yep.
Economic sovereignty in the periphery threatens capital accumulation in the core. To avoid this, the core states must constantly intervene to prevent or crush any movement or government in the periphery that seeks national liberation and economic sovereignty. When you start looking at it through that lens, things make a lot more sense, let me tell you. The U.S. started to support the Zionist project in the 1960s because they saw this as a way to have a military proxy in the Middle East where they could stage counter-revolutionary interventions against the Arab social movements and national liberation struggles that were gaining traction at the time. The U.S. could not accept the prospect of sovereign development. Go ahead.
There was a general, right? What was the general? He said, we're going to go He got a paper on his desk. We're going to go bomb 7 countries.
Well, that was Wesley Clark in 2001.
That was it.
Or 2002. But he's talking about in the 60s that the U.S. couldn't accept the prospect of a sovereign development in the region. The liberation movements had to be crushed or destabilized, and they used Israel to help them do it. Even back in the 60s. Israel has been instrumental in assassinating liberation leaders in the Arab region and interfering in the political processes of the Arab countries to prevent nationalist and socialist parties from coming to power. They want to keep that in the religious kind of dictatorships. That's what they prefer. All right. So where do we go? I lost my spot. It has a long history of attacking the regional states. I clicked the wrong button. The regional states: Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Yemen, etc. Half of them are being bombed right now, destabilizing them and forcing them to divert resources toward defensive spending instead of industrial development. On top of the fact that they take out the infrastructure and they're forced to pay to rebuild that. This is in full alignment with U.S. strategy. Not only in the Middle East, Israel has a long history of providing military and intelligence support to right-wing regimes around the world. For example, Israel armed and supported Argentina's U.S.-backed military junta, which murdered 30,000 socialists and political dissidents. Yes, we did that too. And Israel armed and assisted the U.S.-backed genocide in Guatemala, training military cadres in techniques of torture and ethnic cleansing. They train our cops too. The U.S. supports Israel for the exact same reasons that they've backed the plotters of assassinations and coups against liberation leaders across the global south since the 50s, which deposed Mossadegh in Iran and Lumumba in Democratic Republic of Congo, and Nkrumah in Ghana, Allende in Chile, and Arbenz in Guatemala, and on and on and on. They do it for the same reason they invaded Vietnam, destroyed Libya, and imposed sanctions on Cuba. It's the same pattern with the same objectives. Again, start looking at it through that lens, it becomes very clear. This is why, one reason why Israel is so despised around the world. Not only because they're hell-bent on ethnically cleansing Palestine, but because they intervene everywhere to crush popular movements and create chaos and instability, and this is intolerable. Again, that's in partnership with the United States. But yes. So Israel is not an ally of the U.S. in the conventional sense of the term. It's a proxy force, an attack dog, a partner. This relationship is particularly useful to the U.S. because it allows them to have a degree of distance from their actions and plausible deniability. The U.S. can send weapons to Israel and directly coordinate military strategy with them, then claim it's not responsible for the violence and destruction and war crimes that Israel perpetrates in the region. Literally exactly what we just saw in Gaza City. We gave them those weapons. We sold them those weapons. Help the military plan. We were doing the spy flights. We showed the spy flights last week. That there was a private U.S. outfit that's running Beechcraft spy flights over Khan Yunis on behalf of the British government. The core states use South Africa in the same way. The key reason that Western powers supported the apartheid regime in South Africa, also against overwhelming international condemnation, was because it served as a highly militarized Western colonial outpost that was geared to run up against counterinsurgency operations, not only within South Africa against the ANC and Communist Party. Remember, the U.S. listed Mandela as a terrorist until 2008, but also in Angola, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Namibia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, etc., causing immense violence and chaos. Yes, we destabilize a region by supporting the monsters within it. The vast majority of the world and international law itself supports Palestinian liberation, but the U.S. and its main allies reject this. Why? because Palestinian liberation would remove a key U.S. proxy and would open the way to liberation movements elsewhere in the region. That's probably the scarier thing. A liberated Palestine means a liberated Middle East, and a liberated Middle East at the hinge of Africa and Asia and Europe is strongly antithetical to the interests of Western capitalism. Right? That's, again...
Capitalism.
Yes, sir. That's correct. We're protecting capital. That's all we do here. So this is the situation we're in. The Western ruling classes are willing to back obscene violence in Gaza and shred the liberal values they claim to believe in, resulting in the breathtaking displays of hypocrisy, because they want to maintain the conditions for capital accumulation and geopolitical hegemony. This is U.S. policy.
The conditions that the conditions were in.
Yeah, oh yeah. All the hand-wringing by Biden and the previous administration, the discourse about too many innocent lives lost, was all theater designed to diffuse our outrage. Under Trump, the veneer of concern is just gone. Miriam Adelson bought that concern away. You cannot appeal.
Yeah.
You cannot appeal to imperial power in moral terms. The only way the U.S. will stop arming, funding, and propping up the Zionist regime is when it becomes too costly for them to do so. This will come down to the strength of regional political and military opposition, of which, again, we read in the last articles about Ukraine. They were trying to weaken Russia because they are one of the largest political and military oppositions to this. Maybe. Potentially. But they also go along with Zionism in Israel quite often. And Lubavitcher Chabad.
Quite often.
The strength of the Hague Group.
They have entire fucking rabbis in the fucking Azov.
Well, I'm talking about Russia too. But
yeah.
The strength of the Hague Group and the movement for boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. The strength of punitive measures that can be applied by international courts, except Israel and the U.S. doesn't acknowledge those and is sanctioning them now. All right, so fuck Israel for all of that, for helping the U.S. and CIA destabilize governments. I had two other things, one of which, Jesus, a lot of people have written about this and blame Laura Loomer for this nonsense and calling attention to this, but it wasn't Laura Loomer. It wasn't Laura Loomer that made the decision to block this aid. That was the Trump administration and Stephen Miller and whoever the hell else did it. The Trump admin's halt on medical evacuations from Gaza is a death sentence for Palestinian children. Caitlin Johnstone wrote an article about this. The best way for an injured Palestinian child to get out of Gaza at this point is to mask themselves as an American pedo. All right.
Sure.
The Trump admin's decision
might even be their destiny, if you will. Heyo.
Or a friend named or somebody named, or a friend named Tracy maybe. But the Trump administration's decision to
He's going to hate this segment.
All visitor visas for Palestinians from Gaza, which came after pressure from far right-wing activists, will be a death sentence for children who require life-saving medical treatment. And they've been bringing Palestinian kids here to get treatment, which is the least we can fucking do after providing the weapons and arming and funding the people that did this to them. Right?
Fucking cunts.
Fucking cunts. The U.S. State Department's decision this weekend to halt all visitor visas for people from Gaza, which includes the medical humanitarian visas that have brought injured children to American hospitals, will cost Palestinian lives, of which the State Department does not give a flying fuck. Officials say this process will be subject to a full and thorough review. For a child with infected burns or a deep trauma wound, a pause is a verdict on their life. The freeze did not arise from new intelligence or any novel identification of problems in the temporary visa pathway. It occurred via a social media panic with the circulation of mischaracterized videos of injured children arriving under the care of a U.S. nonprofit being labeled as a security threat, rhetoric amplified by political allies like Marco Rubio. The State Department then announced it was stopping visas while it re-examines procedures, because heaven forbid they came over with their parents and they weren't separated permanently. Because, you know, they don't allow them to ever go back because there's no right of return. The racism and misinformation at the heart of that panic deserve naming. Some have labeled the process of evacuating children with amputations and burns as potentially being linked to terrorism, and even characterized their joyful cries as jihadi chants. That's textbook dehumanization. I don't want to hear George Bush.
Terrorism.
Take a population, fuck him. Take a population of wounded kids and code them as a...
I got 26 seconds of Bush.
That's right,
terror,
fuck
bro.
him.
All right?
Fuck him. He's a fucking cunt, too. All right?
Thank you all.
Take a population of wounded kids and code them as a threat to justify exclusion. Many have commented on the chain reaction from such posts in the administrative action. The line from a viral smear to a federal policy that blocks chemotherapy, skin grafts, or prosthetics for children should shame us and the speed with which it occurred. It also wildly, go figure, overstates the scale of what's actually happened. Of course it did, because that fucking cunt is a hysterical lunatic. In total, many of the NGOs running these U.S. transfers report a few dozen total children to date, not a flood. Individual city stories have been about 2s and 3s, a pair treated in Dallas, several children welcomed in Boston. This is the opposite of a large-scale pipeline. It's a narrow, highly vetted corridor that exists, because Gaza's health system has been shattered. Of course it has, intentionally. To understand how few make it here, you have to understand the pathway that these people are on. First, a physician in Gaza refers a child for care that no longer exists at home. The case goes to a Ministry of Health committee, then to the WHO for medical triage. Only after receiving hospital issues a formal acceptance, often after weeks of back and forth with surgeons, translated records, and imaging, does the family usually even begin the paper chase. Passports, exit permissions from the Israeli military's coordinator for government activities in the territories. Yeah, the Gestapo. Jordanian clearances when the bridge route is used, U.S. visa appointments, and finally, a WHO-escorted convoy. Each step is a separate queue with its own failures and reversals. A single "not yet" in any queue can kill the case. Like, the stars need to align. I would call this unicorn jumping on a rainbow and landing in a pot of gold, is literally how these kids made it here. And now they just closed that door too. The numbers give us a picture of why this corridor matters. According to WHO and OCHA, as of mid-August, more than 14,800 people in Gaza need urgent medical evacuation outside the Strip. Right now! Since October 2023, about 7,560 patients, okay, including more than 5,200 children, have been medically evacuated abroad, with most of those transfers occurring before Israel's closure of Rafah last year, which made departures far rarer and slower. In fact, a 92% decrease was recorded in successful evacuations thereafter. So they basically halted them. Most of these evacuations happened prior to the closure of the Rafah Gate. You mean the blowing up of the Rafah Gate?
Rafah Gate.
On August 13th, the
So
WHO...
like 18th closing.
Right? The WHO managed to move 38 patients, 32 of them children, to care options in Belgium, Italy, and Turkey. Not even here. Such operations are far smaller, of course, than the need. causing the U.S. share of that global effort may look like a minor adjustment from Washington, yet for an injured child in Gaza, it reads as a door slammed shut and probably a death sentence. Because if it was bad enough that they had to be taken here, knowing everybody that's there and still suffering, it's probably pretty fucking bad. American hospitals have long accepted international charity cases. Pediatric centers have taken on many cases from around the world because these are areas where some U.S. teams are among the best in the world and where outcomes can be life-changing and transformative. Except that Israel doesn't want these people's lives to be changed and transformed. They want them dead, right down to a baby. We see these genocidal lunatics talking about it on TV daily. Just go to Twitter and look it up. You can see them. They don't make it a secret. What happens is the Western press tries to whitewash this bullshit and act like this isn't really happening because they know nobody would actually support this nonsense. Now, it's only anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia that are preventing U.S. hospitals from playing a similar role with children from Gaza. Other countries and regions have been accepting far more cases than the U.S. Just like the refugees that they've been accepting from Palestine. And Gaza, West Bank, we take nobody. Since October 2023, the top 5 referral destinations have been Egypt, the UAE, Qatar, Turkey, and EU countries. How come those Arab states won't take their own in? Remember, that's the narrative that comes in by the Zionists. Well, Egypt, the UAE, Qatar, all are Arab nations, aren't they? The cases include children with trauma wounds, patients with cancer, congenital anomalies, cardiovascular issues, and even ophthalmology-related needs. Because you don't have any freaking eye testing equipment anywhere left in Gaza at this point. They blew it all up. The pathway is, in fact, fraught with ethical dilemmas. Children are frequently separated from their caregivers or loved ones. Families are separated or torn apart, as some relatives are denied exit approval, often the men, by Israel, leaving others to stay behind. Also, so they can potentially threaten or torture those people if those people are not returned or monitored or whatever it is that Israel wants. We've met such families and children who've come to the U.S., have heard from their stories and the trauma they've endured, the physical scars and the psychological ones, and the ones that can't even be named. What should happen now is simple. First, immediately reinstate the processing of medical humanitarian visas for children and their companions. Second, we should push towards affirming the right of return for these children. Many families fear never being able to return to Gaza after accepting treatment abroad, with some even choosing to stay in Gaza out of such fears. Third, restoration of medical corridors for Palestinian patients in Gaza to occupied East Jerusalem and the wider occupied West Bank so that they do not need to leave their country and homeland just for treatment if it is available. Of course, Israel will never allow that. Finally, stop letting demagogues dictate whether a Palestinian child gets to live. The moral bar here is not too high, but apparently that's too high for the U.S. and Israel. How sad that the government in Washington can be spurred by a bad faith tweet to close a lifeline for children. Any shred of decency as Americans should compel us to reopen it. Fuck Israel. Support Mondo Weiss for writing that article. All right. Indie Media Award honoree. They're one of the best outlets that report on Palestine regularly. All right. This was Bilal Irfan and Alyssa Saliga. Okay. This was also another really important story that I wanted to get into. Looks like we're probably not going to have a chance to get to some of this stuff. Wow, we didn't get to London or Venezuela yet. This would be a long show, or I don't know. Maybe we'll pick it up tomorrow night.
Whatever.
Reuters journalists accusing the Newswire, their own company, of pro-Israel bias? Yeah, how about that? All right, so this comes out of another Indie Media Award honoree, Declassified UK. They've restaffed and they're doing some great work right now. And They have an exclusive here. Insiders at the world's largest news agency reveal their battles with management over covering Palestine. I don't know how much they've even really battled, but they've actually gone public with it. So that tells me that it's been an issue. So it says that when Israel assassinated Palestinian journalist Anas al-Sharif earlier this month, and again, we covered that on the show with his colleagues, the Reuters news agency ran a report titled, Israel Kills Al Jazeera Journalist It Says Was Hamas Leader. Which it wasn't. They chose that headline despite the fact that al-Sharif used to work for them. He was part of a Reuters team that won a 2024 Pulitzer. Instances like this caused a backlash online, but also sparked concern among some staff at the influential Global Newswire, which was founded in London in 1851 and now has a daily audience of more than 1 billion people. The biggest disseminator of propaganda worldwide. Multiple Reuters employees have spoken to Declassified about what they see as pro-Israel bias among the company's editors and management. Yeah, I would say so. All requested anonymity to avoid reprisals. Again, no surprise. Another, a desk editor, resigned around August 2024, telling colleagues in an email, quote, through covering what we call the Israel-Hamas war, I've realized that my values don't allow with those of the company. In the email, they also said, quote, I've attached a report, an open letter some colleagues and I sent to management in the hopes that Reuters will uphold some basic journalistic principles, but I now recognize that senior leadership is unlikely to change, much less stop actively stifling critiques. Heather Carpenter, a senior director of communications at Reuters, declined to declassify that the company ever received this letter. Of course they did. Plausible deniability. However, a Reuters source told Declassified, quote, a few weeks after the October 7th attack, several journalists at Reuters recognized that our coverage of the Israel-Gaza war lacked objectivity. In response, a group of journalists, while working full-time, undertook a comprehensive internal investigation, conducting both quantitative and qualitative analysis of our reporting. The findings formed the basis of an open letter, which was shared internally to identify and connect journalists within the newsroom who were committed to strengthening Reuters journalism on Gaza. Their internal study, seen by Declassified, can't deny this, analyzed 499 reports tagged as Israel-Palestine, published between October 7th and November 14th, 2023. They found, and this is going to shock you, I know, a consistent pattern of assigning more resources to covering stories affecting Israelis as opposed to Palestinians. At the time of their announcement. And remember that Israel has also murdered Reuters journalists in Lebanon. At the time of their analysis, or maybe it was Syria, over 11 or both, over 11,000 Palestinians in Gaza had been reportedly killed, around 10 times the number of Israeli fatalities. The latest
a lot of stuff happens that the news won't tell you.
And that they knew that they were innocent civilians. The latest death toll as per the Gaza Ministry of Health is nearly 62,000. The actual numbers are expected to be about 3 times higher, at least. They further question why Reuters had not reported more on claims by experts that Israel was committing genocide in Gaza, contrasting it with how the Newswire approached such allegations about Russia's conduct in Ukraine. Its authors also complained that one clear-cut example of how our wording implies bias is in our choice to prohibit the use of the word Palestine. While Palestine might not be recognized as a state in some Western countries, we don't need to pretend that it's not a real place. Reuters management did not respond to Declassified's questions about whether any recommendations from the internal study had been accepted. Why does that not surprise me? Again, here is some of the stuff that they had recommended. Right? By May of this year, however, there were some signs of changes to the style guide, which reflected the earlier internal criticism. Reuters Global News Desk's editor for Quality and Style, Howard S. Gohler, sent an email with subject Reuters style update on the conflict in the Middle East. Again, whitewashing it right there by not calling it a massacre. Nobody is firing back at Israel at this point. The update allows Reuters journalists to use the word genocide with attribution, but still limits the term Palestine for references to historic Palestine from antiquity to 1948. You can't call it occupied Palestine. Even with the looser restrictions on the term genocide, Declassified's analysis found that Reuters went on to use the word in just 14 of 300 reports on its quote-unquote Israel and Hamas at war page between June 21st and August 7th. And there it is charted out. Just how few times the word genocide is mentioned versus not mentioned out of 300 articles. Not mentioned in 286 of them. Terms such as war, campaign, conflict, escalation, and assault were commonly used instead. When genocide was mentioned, it's nearly always with Israel's denial, a practice not afforded to other belligerents such as UAE-backed rapid support forces in Sudan or Russia. The double standard in the coverage of the Gaza genocide and other crimes against humanity, and it's not just Reuters, it's been New York Times and the Associated Press and the Telegraph and the Daily Wire, Daily everything. All right, Daily Caller. It's been flagged by the internal staff in the above-mentioned study. Okay, Dr. Asal Rod, big fan of hers, scholar of Middle East history, known as the headline fixer on social media, told Declassified, quote, the pattern you note is essentially genocide denial. She added that Reuters frames Israel's atrocities in Gaza as part of an ongoing war military campaign, rather than calling it a genocide, despite the consensus among human rights experts and international institutions that have concluded Israel is committing a genocide. But yet, these are the descriptions. Usually they call it war or military campaign. The email quoted sections of from the style guide titled Gaza War 2023 to present and broader context, which provide details primarily from Israel's perspective. Go figure. The updated sections seen by Declassified do not mention crucial details such as the role of the U.S. and Israel in sabotaging ceasefire negotiations. They completely omit Israel's illegal settler colonialism and apartheid and significantly underreport on the extent of destruction in Palestine. For example, the May 27th handbook update fails to cite the Lancet's findings that it's not implausible to estimate that up to 186,000 or even more deaths could be attributable to the current conflict in Gaza. All right. The update also neglects the fact that Gaza has become the deadliest conflict zone for journalists since the U.S. Civil War in 1861, over 230 of them so far. Last year in August, former UN human rights lawyer Craig Mockber wrote for Mondoweiss after he resigned from the UN over this, quote, it's simply not credible to suggest that Western media companies are not aware of the realities on the ground and of what they're doing to obscure them. They have indisputably made conscious choices to hide the genocide from their audiences, to systematically dehumanize the Palestinian victims, and to insulate the Israeli perpetrators from accountability. Why? More recently, in May, writing for Haaretz, Israeli journalist Gideon Levy said, quote, a courageous, decent media scene could have prevented this military operation, but we barely have anything like that. A Reuters spokesperson told Declassified they believe their coverage has been fair and impartial, in keeping with the Thomson Reuters trust principles. As long as that means defense of Israel, sure. All right. As in many newsrooms, our coverage of the war has come under close scrutiny, including by our own journalists, and we've faced feedback from multiple places. Sounds like a lot of bullshit to me. So fuck Israel. fuck Reuters and the newswire services, Reuters and the Associated Press, corporate media that republishes this nonsense uncritically and without edit on a regular basis. I have been calling this out for years. These wire services push CIA and State Department propaganda almost daily. And it's the fastest way for propaganda to be pushed globally across every major media outlet that most people consider to be credible. We know for a fact that they are not credible and that they've been taken over and serve corporate interests and the wealthy, but most people have not figured that out yet. All right. Fuck Israel again. Cunts. I don't know what we're up to, Kieran, but the cunt counter should be up there. So we're not going to get remonetized by YouTube for that. It's almost 11:30. Wow. Been ranting for an hour and a half about Ukraine and just Israel. We still have the crap that's going on in London, people getting arrested. All right. And then we can talk about Venezuela. Venezuela is a long segment. Again, I may want to come back tomorrow night. If you're able to, and it means, please fund the media you want to see. The ways to do that are with Cash App, $ Indie News Network, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, at paypal.me/Indie News Network, over at indienewsnow.com, where you can click on Keep the Media Free. And then we've got the indiemediatoday.com Substack, where we're still live right now. Hi to everybody over there. Aaron Paul Against Genocide. How are you, man? Thanks for subscribing. Free subscriber over there. We really appreciate those too. Go follow Aaron Paul Against Genocide over on Substack. Also at INNnewsletter.com. That's for the network. So by all means, go check that out. Go sign up and go connect with everyone that supports fuck Israel, that movement for sure. All right. Now, I also wanted to get into London. Oh, my goodness. This is some crazy shit here. Now, again, not always the biggest fan of these people, but this guy does some pretty good stuff. The people who hung this banner outside Labour headquarters have been arrested and will face trial in the UK in January. These are the extreme Orwellian measures that Western governments must take to normalize Israel's genocide and war crimes. Ready for this? Yep. They dropped a banner across a building. Yep, they draped a banner across scaffolding.
Well, clearly that's violence, Indy. Clearly that's violence.
I think this might even be the street that
banners are violence.
That Dr. Hossam Abu Safia walked down to climb into that tank. It feels like right about there. I remember that footage like it was yesterday. But they got prosecuted for hanging this fucking banner. It's so far over the top draconian.
So it could be easily fucking taken down. Someone's like, okay.
Yep.
Like, zero destruction of property.
All right. But worse, this is a 2-minute and 20-second video of a retired male nurse in London who was arrested for holding a sign. And let's check this one out. Before we do that, let's go to switching slideshow office. Okay.
Do you have a message?
I'm being arrested for holding up a placard which says, I oppose genocide and I support Palestine action. This isn't just about Palestine action. This is about freeing the British legal system from the oppression of the Zionist lobby. I've witnessed the genocide in Palestine, and that is what this is really about. This is really about covering up the genocide. Thank you very much. This is about the British government covering up a genocide, a blatant genocide of nearly 6 million beautiful Muslim people. We need to free up our country from the oppression of the Zionist lobby. Neoliberal capitalism is the biggest threat the world has ever seen.
They've tried to scrub this whole video off the internet, by the way.
I oppose genocide and I support Palestine action. In their actions to bring the world's awareness and to stop the genocide in Palestine. 5 times I worked in Palestine as an emergency medic, 4 times in Gaza. I was in Gaza in the last Nakba. I witnessed things there after 30 years of work in emergency. I witnessed things in Gaza that broke me as a man. And the people of Palestine put me back together. They are warm, welcoming, hospitable Muslim people. They're a strong, resilient people. And this is not being done in my name. We need to free Britain from the oppression of the Zionist lobby. We need to free Britain from the oppression of neoliberal capitalism. Britain isn't Britain anymore. Britain is an owned country. When it comes to a point where they're arresting emergency medics and arresting retired medics and doctors for holding up a piece of paper with words on it, whereas they sell weapons that kill people from outer space. I've seen drones burning children in their beds, and they were provided by this country, no other country. They were British made. This is a proxy British Americano genocide.
Absolutely.
Good for you, dude.
Dude, hearing it right from the mouth of a guy.
My boy, Blue.
Lee Evans, okay? He's been there in the trenches. And you're going to deny him the right to speak? Fuck you. Fuck Israel for that. And
fuck you. Fuck Britain.
Just to show how captured they are, again, we go back to Indie Media Award honoree Declassified UK. You can't see the logo there, but it's there. All right, John McAvoy, who's one of the managing editors now. And this was from June 25th of last year, just to remind people how Israel funds the UK parliamentary staff. So they've infiltrated, folks. Right? Israel has paid for at least a dozen UK parliamentary staff to visit the country on special delegations in the last 5 years. A further 18 staffers have accepted funding or hospitality from pro-Israel lobby organizations in Britain, such as Labor Friends of Israel and We Believe in Israel. Several worked for MPs in Keir Starmer's front bench team, including Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves, Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting, and Shadow Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson. I believe Rachel Reeves now may be Home Secretary. Our investigation found how the Israeli Israeli embassy in London, its Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and associated lobby groups seek to influence not only members of parliament, but also their assistants, because those are the people that actually get the work done. Declassified previously revealed that 1 in 4 British MPs in the last parliament accepted funding from pro-Israel lobby groups or individuals. So it's not just happening here. And I didn't even realize that they were allowed to buy off staff like that. That was legal. Like, it's illegal for a foreign government, technically, to pay off a lawmaker here, so they whitewash it through American companies. All right, but apparently they can just fund stuff for staffers. The Israeli embassy in London funded 10 staff members of Tory MPs to visit Israel and a young conservative political leaders delegation in 2022. They worked for MPs such as Stephen Crabb, Nicola Richards, and Bob Blackman, all of whom are closely associated with conservative Friends of Israel. No surprise. Again, all these lobbying groups are just paying this money.
Labor Friends of Israel.
No. Although they basically serve the same purpose. One of the staffers, Simon Phipps, is now a conservative candidate for Birmingham Selly Oak. The trip involved meeting with government officials and businesses in Israel as part of a UK delegation. The visit was declared in an obscure parliamentary database called the Register of Interests of Members, Secretaries, and Research Assistants. It contains little information about what the staffers did in Israel or who they met. All data prior to 2018 has been destroyed in line with official regulations. How convenient. Okay, so this is an interesting story. I just wanted to bring that because it went back a little bit, but it's important. Here's the European Leadership Network. That's another organization that brought people to to Israel. ELNet was funded by Dov Foreman, a staffer for Tory MP Robert Jenrick, to go on a solidarity trip to Israel amid the genocidal war on Gaza. Whitewashing trip. All right. Another funders, We Believe in Israel. Yeah. Again, this is last year, and they're still doing this shit. So again, I wanted to go back and bring that up in Declassified to point out some of the ways that they were buying off British lawmakers then. Now, on a positive note, you have this Irish writer, God bless the Irish, Sally Rooney, another one who says, I support Palestine action. If this makes me a supporter of terror under UK law, so be it. She also announced that she was going to donate the proceeds from her book to funding and supporting Palestine action. Terrorism used to be when you killed people. Now terrorism is when you try to stop people being killed. Ayuba Ahmad, you should definitely follow him too. And then finally, Professor David Miller wrote this article. This is a really short one, but he's been calling out Jeremy Corbyn. Oh, Jeremy Corbyn.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Why didn't somebody tell me that my screen was messed up? Here, let's turn the slideshow back on. There you go.
I don't know.
I didn't notice that till just now. You saw the rest of my screen there, folks. All right.
You're right.
David Miller wrote this article. Now, your party is the new thing that's emerging that was co-founded by Zara Sultana, who left the Labour Party, and Jeremy Corbyn. And they're trying to get together a group, and allegedly they have over 300,000 people who have pledged their support for 3 million. They're bigger than the Labour Party right now. So David Miller's been looking into exactly what their policies are going to be. Are they just going to be like a neoliberal light? Because Corbyn has had issues, especially on two-state solution. So he says, I'm told that your party has now named 7 members in a presumably interim executive committee. He says, I'm able to share the names and the official positions of 3 of the 7, which are listed in the internal documents. They are Amy Jackson, once a political secretary at LOTO and Unite's director of politics, now head of executive team. Well, what's Unite? We'll get to that in a minute. Harry Murphy, ex-chief of staff at LOTO. What is LOTO? We'll get to that. Forced out after shenanigans with John McDonnell, now back in charge of conference and event planning. Again, this is electoral stuff, but they're trying to form a third party. What's happening is that this is the same tried and failed incompetent clique that brought down the first Corbyn project. Out of cowardice, they capitulated to the Board of Deputies and the Israel lobby last time, believing in a two-state solution. Specifically, this guy, James Schneider. All right. He worked for
Schneider.
Yeah, he worked for LOTO, but also Progressive International and the Peace and Justice Project. Who's he married to? Keir Starmer's press secretary. Now we know that Keir Starmer undermined Corbyn and smeared him with that entire called him an anti-Semite for standing up for Palestine, even though Corbyn tepidly supports a two-state solution, though he has been strongly in support of the Palestinian people. But being married to Keir Starmer's press secretary and working under Corbyn's new party, that's inviting the snake into your garden. He was central to the disastrous labor push to accept the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism against the will of the members and to the strategy of apologizing and throwing anti-Zionists under the bus. His new title is a mouthful. Comms inclusive of mainstream media, social media, speechwriter, spokesperson, supporter comms. That's everything. That's the entire message is on this guy's shoulders. They betrayed the will of the mass membership and turbocharged the witch hunt. Now history risks repeating. They're trying to get this. This reminds me of Jeff Weaver joining Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2020, right? Of the Foxes joining the Hen House, of Peter Dow joining the Marianne Williamson campaign in 2024. All All right.
Or
They're
any other
sending their
campaign.
known hatchet men. For some reason, Corbyn and whoever is accepting these fucking morons. All right. And David Miller is standing up and trying to tag these people and be like, what are you doing? A handful of tried and tested failures could once again squander a movement of 800,000 decent Britons. But that's their whole intent now, isn't it? It's essential.
That's the plan.
It's essential that anyone who has a voice in this process intervenes now to ensure that the whole project is not strangled at birth by the same team that hung thousands of anti-Zionist labor members out to dry last time and capitulated to the Zionist movement. And he's tagging the leaders of this new Your Party, YP. YP also is your problem. So that's not so much that I like, but okay. So again, we likely will not be remonetized by YouTube for calling out the Corbyn party for not being pro-Palestine enough and for potentially allowing a pro-Keir Starmer snake in their garden. So if you're able to and have means, please help fund the media you want to see elsewhere by doing so at Cash App, $Indie News Network. We can do so at Ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. A couple of people have done that already tonight. You can do that at PayPal.me/Indie News Network. You can do that at IndieNewsNow.com under Keep the Media Free, and that goes right to our Stripe. We can do that over at Substack at IndieMediaToday.com. You can subscribe on a monthly or an annual basis. All right. And you can subscribe at INNNewsletter.com. Totally separate newsletter with totally different content. Although I am now sharing some older INN newsletter content to Indie Media Today subscribers this week because I realized most of the people there had not subscribed and had never seen these articles. So I'm resharing them with a different audience to give it some new life. Specifically, the pieces about breaking points and even the segment that I did last year with Colin on INN News about the infiltration of independent media by corporate media, and citing many different examples there of what we're talking about. All right. All right. I did want to get to Venezuela. I know it's getting close to midnight. We'll have a lightning round, and we're going to get the boat smashing into other boats, I promise. But we made it to Venezuela. So what's happening in Venezuela? We talked about it briefly in the lightning round last week. Dave DeCamp, antiwar.com, and Dave he's done it again. Dirty bastard. No, we love Dave DeCamp. Anti-war news. He is an Indie Media Award honoree, one of the best of the best of the best. Big fan of Dave's. All right. Trump administration deploys 3 U.S. Navy destroyers and 4,000 troops near Venezuela. Yes, we want the oil. And I'm going to get to an article written by somebody sitting in the audience right now, I believe, Descent Bloom, who wrote all about, did a great piece on Venezuela that's really long. Trump admin deploys 3 U.S. Navy destroyers and 4,000 troops. The U.S. appears to be moving toward another regime change effort against Maduro under unsubstantiated claims that he's leader of a cartel. Last year, they tried to undermine his election, which they even allowed after sanctions had been there. Again, Descent and Bloom will talk about that. The U.S. is deploying 3 Navy destroyers off the coast of Venezuela in a move aimed at pressuring President Nicolas Maduro, signaling what appears to be another push for regime change. One official told Reuters, remember the propagandists for the world, that a total of 4,000 U.S. sailors and Marines are expected to be committed to the Trump administration's efforts in the southern Caribbean region. I remember very clearly that Whitney Webb, before Trump took office, said that what they were likely going to do, and I remember Fiorella and Eva and Vanessa were mentioning that they were speculating Trump was going to bring a lot of the troops back to the Western Hemisphere and focus mostly on Western Hemisphere control. And this is perfect. Between this border control and Mexico is perfectly in line with what they were talking about. U.S. officials say the deployment is an effort to combat threats from Latin American drug cartels, quote unquote, as the U.S. has made the unsubstantiated claim that Maduro is the leader of a cartel. The accusation goes back to the first Trump administration, when then Attorney General Bill Barr indicted the Venezuelan leader over claims of narco-terrorism, which was, again, really just about the oil. And remember, they tried to displace Maduro and replace him with the infamous Juan Guaido. All right. The claim was made over alleged cocaine trafficking, even though data showed at the time that the vast majority of cocaine coming into the U.S. went through the Eastern Pacific rather than Venezuela's Caribbean waters. All right. Also, Colombia. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked on Tuesday about the deployments near Venezuela and if the U.S. was considering putting boots on the ground in the country. I hope not. Leavitt replied, President Trump has been very clear and consistent. He's prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into our country, at least ones that we don't allow ourselves, and to bring those responsible to justice. The Maduro regime is not, according to her, is not the legitimate government of Venezuela, except that they were duly elected last year, and only Edison Research, an NED USAID funded outlet, is the only worldwide outlet that claimed so. And they haven't been able to produce the receipts for that. Again, she's claiming that it's a narco-terror cartel, and Maduro, it's the view of this administration, is not a legitimate president. He's a fugitive head of this cartel, and he has been indicted in the United States for trafficking drugs into the country. Really? Maduro himself trafficked drugs. R&R.
Not the drugs.
The Trump administration has taken other steps that signal another attempt at regime change in Venezuela, including increasing the bounty on Maduro from $25 million to $50 million and labeling cartels specially designated global terrorists. I've heard that before, including Cartel de los Soles, a term used to describe an alleged network of Venezuelan officials involved in drug trafficking that doesn't actually exist as an organization. Almost like Palestine Action at this point. The U.S. designated the so-called Cartel de los Soles over claims that it supports the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua and Mexico's Sinaloa cartel. Of course it doesn't. However, a recently declassified U.S. intelligence memo said it was unlikely that Maduro's government cooperates with or directs TDA, and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has denied that there's any evidence linking Maduro. Get your Sheinbaum to Sinaloa. No link between Maduro and Sinaloa. The memo from the Office of the Director of Intelligence, all right, dated April 7th, said that while some members of the Venezuelan government may tolerate or cooperate with TDA, Maduro and his top officials view the group as a threat. They're not in favor of them. The Maduro regime probably does not have a policy of cooperating with TDA and is not directing TDA movement to and operations in the United States. That's coming from the DNI themselves. I think that's a woman named Tulsi Gabbard. Earlier this month, Get Your Sheinbaum told reporters that the U.S. announcement about Maduro's alleged ties to Sinaloa was the first she had heard about it. Of course it was. On Mexico's part, there is no investigation that has to do with that. As we always say, if they have some evidence, show it. We do not have any proof. Maduro said on Monday that in response to threats from the Trump administration, he's going to deploy millions of members of a pro-government militia across the country. Quote, this week, I'll activate a special plan with more than 4.5 million militiamen to ensure coverage of the entire national territory, militias that are prepared, activated, and armed. He's saying fuck around and find out. On our turf. While the Trump administration has taken steps to add pressure on Maduro, it's also recently reversed a ban on Chevron pumping oil in Venezuela, and Venezuelan oil is now on its way to the U.S. How about that? Speaking of which, again, our friend Dissent in Bloom. The Trump admin is planning an American takeover of Venezuela. Very plain, very simple. For more great takes on this, again, follow Arturo Dominguez at Decolonized Journalism. But this, again, is an outstanding article. Military on their shoreline, sanctions, deportations, and oil deals are pushing Venezuela toward American takeover. When America says freedom, It means oil. It's been a few months. Freedom. It's been a few months since Trump stood on that stage and promised to retake the Panama Canal from China. At the time, it sounded absurd. It still does. The U.S. handed control of the canal back to Panama in 1999. By the way, China doesn't run it. That was another lie from Trump. But the corporate media ran with it like
dumb shit.
Right? Corporate media ran with it like it was a serious policy. Yes. Pumping out headlines that made it seem like America had lost something to China that needed to be reclaimed. While everyone was busy arguing.
We're gonna get back Alcatraz.
We're gonna
rebuild Alcatraz.
No, they just decided to build one in the swamp. And by the way, that
make
got
a new one somewhere else.
Right. They got deemed that they have to take that one down now too. But while everyone was busy arguing over that fiction, the real move was happening off camera when BlackRock, the massive investment firm, quietly signed a $22.8 billion deal to take over the ports at both ends of the canal. See, they didn't need to buy the entire canal, but they bought the gates. That's all that mattered, because if you control the gates, then you control who gets in and gets out. And in the end, Trump got his win in the media, and the Panamanian people got screwed, and BlackRock got their throttle on global trade. As she reminds us, the Panama Canal is one of the most important trade routes in the world. But this goes beyond Panama. It's about Wall Street trying to control global trade routes in order to control the world. Roughly 3/4 of the ships that pass through the canal are tied to U.S. trade, and now that BlackRock controls the ports at both ends, American corporations can now decide who gets to move goods, including oil. And the next target is Venezuela. Why? When most people think of oil, they think of the Middle East, but see, Venezuela actually has the world's largest oil reserve. Their economy is doing poorly, but it's not because they don't have resources, it's because of us. The U.S. knows about their oil, Trump knows, and the Trump's administration is making damn sure only one company, Chevron, gets the profit from it. At least until he can. As of today, they are the only company that the U.S. has allowed to export any Venezuelan oil at all, as you heard Dave DeCamp mention, like in the world. And now they're importing it into the U.S. with the first oil tanker since April arriving just days ago. Meanwhile, every other country in the world gets slapped with a 25% tariff if they even try, all thanks to this executive order quietly signed by Trump in March that states if you import Venezuelan oil, we'll come after you. So, as you can see, we're already using the trade market as a weapon. Read the rest of this article, and once you obtain this knowledge, I want you to take a moment to really think about how bleak this could all get. Right? This is a map of the world oil reserves according to OPEC in 2013. And notice that Venezuela is the darkest spot in the world. So I know what you're thinking. What makes Chevron so special? Who are they compared to the oil execs in Trump's financial sugar daddy book? And remember also previously that Trump's very first Secretary of State was a guy by the name of Rex Tillerson, who was the CEO of ExxonMobil. He has never been one to shy away from working closely with oil companies and realize that oil companies really control a lot of the global trade and flow. In 2025, Chevron isn't just riding shotgun to Trump's presidency, it's co-driving. The millions it poured into his inauguration fund wasn't charity, it was a contract, it was an investment. Chevron bankrolls, Trump blends policy in their favor. See, Trump at first yanked Chevron's license, along with everyone else, to export oil from Venezuela, then reinstated it in July with a rigged twist that left Chevron as the sole foreign player allowed to pump and export oil to the U.S. How convenient. The only profit going to Chevron here, because the caveat was that they couldn't pay Venezuela for the oil, so they had to barter it somehow. From there, the company synced itself to Trump's entire political theater. It partnered with Engine No. 1 and GE Vernova to build gas-fired power foundries for the AI boom, and even parroted Trump's renaming of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America without hesitation. How embarrassing. So no, this isn't just oil policy. It's state corporate fusion. There's another word for that, where the White House, BlackRock, and Chevron write the rules together, trading democracy for dominance, all while setting Venezuela up to be the next domino to fall. That lays out the chessboard. So Trump, of course, has been saying it. We're going to take the oil. Is this about Syria?
They say he left troops in Syria. You know what I did? I left troops to take the oil. I took the oil. The only troops I have are taking the oil. They're protecting the oil. I took over.
We're taking the oil. We're not taking the oil.
Well, maybe we will. Maybe we won't.
They're protecting the facility.
I don't know. Maybe we should take it, but we have.
Maybe we'll break his legs. Maybe we won't.
Nice country you got there. Be a shame if something happened to it.
Be a real shame if something that happens to it.
Which the U.S. has done time and time again in so many other countries. This is what we do every time we liberate a country from a dictator. Studies have found that countries with large oil reserves are more likely to suffer wars and foreign military interventions. Shocker. Again, we brought that Jason Hickel article that confirms and validates that. This isn't any different. The U.S. has been actively destabilizing Venezuela since the 1920s to try to gain control over their oil reserves, too. Documents show that back as early as the start of this century, we've been feeding money to help Venezuela's opposition army enact a democracy with a new leader. Of course, a leader chosen by the United States. Reminders of Mossadegh and Iran and the Shah. Of course, right? In fact, it's happened multiple times. First in 1945, Bush tried it in 2002, and Trump tried in 2019. That's actually when the current sanctions in place initially started against Venezuela. Had he tried a different coup tactic against Venezuela in 2019 and failed, or he had tried, and now he's using the tried and true method, doing the exact same thing the U.S. did to Iran in the 1950s under Operation Ajax. You ever hear about how the U.S. destabilized the Middle East? This is how. Interestingly, she notes, when Joe Biden took office in 2021, he never rescinded those Trump-placed sanctions. But in 2022, he did give Chevron the first special license to export oil from there under them. Priorities, am I right? And I believe, wasn't Chevron the organization that Steve Donziger was suing for poisoning the indigenous people down there in Brazil?
I think so. I don't know about Brazil, but pretty sure.
Maybe it was Colombia. Now, the entire purpose of sanctions and now tariffs is to hurt Venezuela's economy, putting them in a position to topple Maduro's regime. They want that damn oil, and they're not giving up. That's what the murder walrus wanted in 2019. John Bolton. He had a bit of a rough week, I heard.
Right.
This has been what's happening as we've all been scratching our heads at the erratic policies, executive orders, the manufactured trade chaos, the bizarre fixation on retaking things that were never ours in the first place. But see, this entire thing isn't random. It's a strategy. One that merges corporate power, foreign policy, and resource extraction into a single machine, giving the U.S. more money at the expense of innocent people. It begins with the letter F. These sanctions and tariffs don't just squeeze Maduro, they crush ordinary Venezuelans. Again, the point of sanctions. The U.S. has been the single biggest driver of the humanitarian crisis tearing this country apart. A not-so-fun fact, Trump's fight with China isn't about spies or ideology, it's oil. By mid-2025, China was buying over 90% of Venezuela's crude thanks to Trump's tariffs and sanctions. Washington pretends it's about democracy, but the truth is they're furious that China keeps bankrolling the country they want to collapse. That's why hundreds of thousands fled here, only to be sent back by Trump to the same collapsing country they escaped. Not for border control, but for destabilization. It's a tactic. Think back to Trump's recent revocation of temporary protected status for Venezuelans. That wasn't about immigration. It was about weaponizing people as leverage, stripping protections from 350,000 Venezuelans. I remember we reported on that, forcing deportations, funneling them into CCOT, and even twisting the Alien Enemies Act. It was all deliberate. The plan was simple: overwhelm Venezuela's fragile system with returnees, crank up the pressure, and push the country closer to collapse. Every deportation wasn't just cruelty. It was a chess move in the larger game to topple a government and hand the oil fields to U.S. corporations. As you read this, our military is already closing in on this Venezuelan crisis. Right? U.S. military again on the coast of Venezuela. The Iwo Jima, the San Antonio, and the Fort Lauderdale to join 3 guided missile destroyers already there, as reported by Anti-War. On board are 4,500 service members, including a Marine Expeditionary Unit with 2,200 troops ready to deploy. Remember that Maduro said he was deploying 4.5 million to the streets to secure the borders. 2,200 troops? That doesn't sound like very much. Officially, it's a counter-narcotics mission, as we pointed out. In reality, it's the muscle behind everything that she's just laid out. Trump labeled Maduro and his allies narco-terrorists, raised the $50 million bounty on his head, and slapped sanctions designed to break the economy. Now, the Navy gives him the threat of boots on the ground to make it all real. Also, to enforce a blockade. Maduro has responded by mobilizing more than 4.5 million militia members and rallying allies in Cuba, Bolivia, and Nicaragua who are warning that Washington's drug war is just a cover for intervention. Strip away the labels and the propaganda, and you can see it clearly. BlackRock locks down the gates in Panama. Chevron locks down the oil in Venezuela. The military locks down the coastline. It's one machine moving in sync, and Trump supplying the show while corporations cash in and ordinary people pay the price. Of course, we know about America's pick for Maduro's replacement because our friend Golden Monarch has been talking about her for a while. If Trump had succeeded in 2019, the administration's chosen leader would have been someone to line the pockets of his rich friends with even more oil money. Juan Guaido! We know that name. He's turned into a party joke.
Mm-hmm.
But much to Trump's dismay, Venezuela did not fall in 2019. Juan Guaido was run out of the country and had the shit beaten out of him in the streets by the people. That was hilarious. Former National Security Advisor, murder walrus John Bolton told us about it several times. Once on CNN, another time in his own memoir, the same John Bolton who had his home raided. This week, quote, I saw what it took for opposition to try and overturn an illegally elected president, and they failed. The notion that Donald Trump was half as competent as the Venezuelan opposition leader is laughable. Of course, Marco Rubio is already hard at work to choose a leader for the American-occupied Venezuela. You probably haven't seen this, but back in May, Rubio actually had met with several Venezuelan opposition leaders, but only named Maria Corina Machado and Juan Pablo Guanipa in the official memo that followed. He then paints Maria as a martyr in this document. It almost feels like a precursor to her rise, yeah? Now it turns out that she's working with the Bitcoin creeps. You combine those two things, mark my words, if Venezuela falls, you can look for the U.S. government to place Juan Pablo Guanipa or, more likely, Maria Corina Machado, because she's friendly with the bankers, as the new U.S.-placed Democratic leader, even though nobody elected them. So, here's her take on Maria Machado, handpicked by the Asian Council of the Americas, right? In June 2025, a powerful business group called the COA, backed by Big Oil, including Chevron and corporate America, held an event with the very same Maria Corina Machado. How convenient. Instead of focusing on human rights or democracy, the meeting was about money. They told banks, oil companies, and investors that Venezuela's crisis is an opportunity to get rich if Maduro's government falls. I'm not going to play this. I think this is a long video. Yeah, it's almost an hour.
Well, good morning, everyone.
All right. Parasites, $1 trillion opportunity. The global upside, gross. The Americas Society. Machado laid out a plan to sell off public industries, bring in the IMF and World Bank, and make it easier for foreign companies to operate with cheap labor and few rules. What a great representation of American democracy. She's Juan Guaido 2.0 in a skirt. So here are her final thoughts. Here's the big picture. Panama was never about China. It was about BlackRock controlling the gates. Venezuela was never about cartels. It was about Chevron controlling the oil. And the U.S. military on the coast is not about drugs. It's about enforcing the deal. This is state fusion. No, it's state fascism dressed up as foreign policy, a machine where Trump provides the theater, Wall Street writes the contracts, and the Pentagon brings the guns. Again, fascism is the merger of state and corporate. That's exactly what this is. And support Dissent in Bloom.
Capitalism.
She just passed 11,000 free subscribers on Substack. Congratulations to her for that. And she's ranking it also on the paid sub. So if you're able to, and of means, support her with a monthly or annual paid subscription. Fascists hate an educated mind. Share this also to spread the word. Talk about it. Restack it. Let the world know what we're really up against. We're in this together. All right. And support independent media. So, what's up, everyone? Fuck Venezuela, too. Well, no, support Venezuela. Fuck the Trump administration. Maduro isn't exactly a good guy. But like Putin, he's being set up here. Right? And if he retaliates in any way, they're going to call him a dictator and a thug and a drug dealer. They've already set this narrative up, right?
You've already done that.
So that's what's happening here. All right, we're still going to get to boats. I did have a lightning round. Before we do that again, fund the media you want to see, support independent media. We do not get funded on YouTube. The ways to do that are Cash App, $, Indie News Network, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, paypal.me/Indie News Network, over at indienewsnow.com, at INNnewsletter.com, where we're going to be live for boats smashing other boats in a little bit, and at indiemediatoday.com, where we're live now and have been since the beginning of the show. So, again, I have a quick set of stories I just want to show you the headlines for. I will drop the links, and you'll have to go through them yourself. And I encourage everyone, too, because they're really important stories. It's just, you see how much stuff I had to cover already. Number one, Sludge. I like these guys a lot. Donnie, and David Moore, two guys run this accountability journalism newsletter, non-profit, user-funded. Lawmakers hold stocks in defense, energy, and tech companies they oversee. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone here, but the list of 13 senators and representatives whose stock portfolios raise conflict of interest questions. You can only imagine who's in there. All right. You have Susan Collins, and that's who was in the photo above. All right. You have Thomas Daffron, right? Former Republican Senate chief, was chief operating officer for lobbying firm Jefferson Consulting. Like, just a lot. Hickenlooper holds between 100,000 and $250,000 worth of Raytheon stock since 2020. Dividends of up to 5,000 last year. Get into this whole thing. Josh Gottheimer. They're talking about him at some point becoming Speaker of the House and replacing Jeffries as new leader. He's making a ton of money and selling stock. And you've got people who are buying oil and big tech and banks. Debbie Dingell. A lot of Democrats in there, by the way. But also, of course, we know Marjorie Taylor Greene with the Palantir, Amazon, Microsoft, Tesla. Look at all that shit. Okay? So that's Sludge, Donnie. All right, next. An article from The Conversation. We've been talking about data centers. Data centers consume massive amounts of water, and companies rarely tell the public exactly how much. So this is a longer article by a couple of people over at the center, the director of the Center for Water Policy, and a water policy specialist for University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. Right? Definitely read this one. This is fascinating. Right? And then speaking more of water, Erin Brockovich, one of the most famous water people there is, we have how to plan for having no water. And here are just some examples of where there have been weeks where people go without water. And what do you do to prepare for this? This is actually like a how-to. I really love that she does this. It's always practical solutions. While drought in California gets a ton of attention, it also lacks adequate water infrastructure to provide Californians with the resources they'll need in the future. The data doesn't lie, and it's telling us that our water system is unprepared for California's hotter and drier climate, Governor future President Newsom said in a statement earlier this summer. Well, hopefully not. Despite efforts to increase groundwater and develop stronger partnerships with water agencies, because the Resnicks own most of the water in California, California's new water system remains unprepared for the hotter and drier future, according to a new report showing that the state is collecting more groundwater data than ever before. So check that one out. The fourth one, and this is the only time I'm going to talk about this, hopefully this asshole on this show ever. Zohran Mamdani is already being co-opted by big business and the Democratic Party. I don't like mentioning this guy, but
who would have thought that?
Left Voice laid out a bunch of reasons why people should not be buying into this clown, why you should distrust anybody who is pushing this guy and who is claiming that he is some kind of a hope or a future of the Democratic Party. He might be, but he's also taking big money from all kinds of people all over the place. This was actually published out of France, because of course no American would possibly write this. But Zohran has not yet been elected, but he's already organizing meetings with big business leaders and Democratic Party officials. The new hope for international reformism is already capitulating on his principles. So go read this one from Left Voice. Again, I'll put this in the description. All right. Now we'll get to the GoFundMe's quick, and then we'll get to votes. All right. Unfortunately, our friend Shanda had a setback this week. She got a PET scan back. This is the proper way to tell cancer to fuck off. Just a quick update. Her cancer's back. Her last PET scan, I think it is, showed a massive new hot spot, mostly in her lungs, ribs, and liver, and legs. She met with her oncologist yesterday. Her case is very unusual. Her cancer isn't acting like a typical ex-SCLC, of course. So he's referring her to Fred Hutchinson, University of Washington specialist, back to radiation, and her pulmonary thoracic surgeon. She's dealing with the worst pain she's ever known in the tops of her femur bones and hips. So he's upped her pain meds. She swears the amount that she's taking now is insane. We have second-line chemo in place once we pinpoint what's going on in my liver, and more radiation to her legs. She knew something had changed. She was just hoping she was overdoing it, but rest assured, she's not giving up, and neither are we. She's having to use a walker just to keep the pain in her legs under control, but hey, she's already made it further than half the people who've ever been diagnosed at the same time as herself. Can't believe it's already been exactly 1 year since we were all blindsided by this evil monster. She's in much need of so many things now that it's progressing. If you can help out, here's the GoFundMe link. We can't thank all of you enough for your love, support, and encouragement. She knows she wouldn't have made it this far without it. And we even kicked in this week to that campaign, Fuck Cancer. I'll drop that into all the YouTube descriptions, or wherever, into the chat, and it'll be in the description for the video, as well as linked in the Substack for this stream. I can't get it into the description in most of the other channels, but it'll be at Substack. So, a note of encouragement and a couple of bucks if you have it. Over 2,700 raised already. She needs some more help for sure. All right, Jack's Page threw down. Kameshwari Kate, I saw you were the other person that contributed here. Thank you so much. Trina Jones was one of the top donations there. again, thank you to everybody who's able to support our friend Shanda. We love you. Next, we have Cowboy Kitty Anthony Malecki, also likely in chat. His sister-in-law is dealing with an ICE detention for an illegal traffic stop for a registration that was not expired, but that's what they claimed. Natalia came to the U.S. with her daughter to pursue a better life, fleeing an abusive ex-husband who threatened to kill her. Her entire family's here, and now she's being abused by a fascist police state that's torturing her for the profits of the prison industrial complex. Fuck ICE. Disgusting. All right, so Natalia and her family could use help also, and her GoFundMe is also, I'm going to drop that into the all of the chats as well. Love you, brother Anthony. And again, anything anybody can do. We've raised over 1,100 for her, but long way to go. 4,500 is the goal there. Now, I have not gotten an update from our friend Andrew since seeing this over at formerly Action for Assange. Andrew Zygmunt Smith, his daughter Anna Marie has been undergoing some brain tumor stuff, back in surgery. I don't know if she was home yet. They were looking for prayers and anything that you could do to help. Again, they've raised over 7,700. They're trying to get to 9,000. So let's drop that in there for them as well. Man, fuck cancer, and it's just brutal, Finally, again, this is Indie News Now. This is the website I've been talking about all night during the breaks when we talk about funding the media. The Keep the News Free section is right here. That does link to our Stripe. It also has a shop link embedded from our old shop. Now, that old shop somebody ordered from last in June and never got their stickers, so I'm a little hesitant to order from them. I have a different shop that I can share a link for. Also, if you click on Watch Live, we are actually live right now. You can break this down by articles, podcasts, videos, or just looking at everything that comes in as a fire hose of content 24/7. This is the new shop, by the way. It's at indienewsshop.itemorder.com/shop/home. And again, I'm going to put that in the chat there for everyone in case you want to order some merch. INN t-shirts, indie t-shirts with the tie. We've got stickers. We've got beanies. We've got baseball hats, snapbacks. We got tank tops for the ladies, like our friend Anna Mayers, who likes to wear tank tops. Love you, Anna. Hope you're doing well.
Right quick.
All right. And I think that's all I had. And I'm spent. Kameshwari Kate cannot make it over to boats. All right. Well, sorry to hear. Well, you can always catch the replay. You know, it'll be up on YouTube as long as they don't pull it down. It'll be up on Rumble and everywhere else. So you can definitely go back and check it out later on. Thank you anyway for all the support. Love you. One more time before we get out of here, I do want to show the supporters and all those amazing people that have supported our channel, including Anthony Malecki, Cowboy Kitty, that's up there. All right. INN supporters, yeah. Cash App, $ Indie News Network. co-fi.com/Indie News Network. All right. PayPal.me/Indie News Network. At IndieNewsNow.com, which I just showed. At IndieMediaToday.com, where we have been live tonight. And we will be going live next at INNNewsletter.com for our react show, Boats Smashing into Other Boats. We're going to watch some goofy shit because we need to eye bleach after all that crazy horror stuff and all the wars that are about to start and the dystopian stuff happening in London and how much control Israel is exercising over everyone. Hopefully they're not going to exercise any control over the next show. So join us for Boats Smashing into Other Boats. Let's drop the links over to watch it here on YouTube or over on Rumble. You can catch it over on Twitter at INNnewsletter.com. We're also going to be live on Odyssey, Bitchute, Twitch, and Kick. So, and of course at IndieNewsNow.com, like we are every time the channel is live. All right. So again, love you all. Thank you so much for everybody who's here tonight. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. I truly believe that. And we'll see you soon. I love you all. Have a great night, everyone.
We go party. Mwah. Ciao, baby.
No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride. I thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
My favorite songs don't hit the same way. I get to the end of a 4-minute track and I'm only looking back thinking, what did they actually say?
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want?